Well, welcome everybody to What the Puck. I'm Puck. With me tonight is Ethan, owner of this channel, and Dry Apologist. Dry Apologist, would you say a few things about yourself real quick?
All right, yeah, sure. So I'm really interested in philosophical, theological debates and discussions. I have my own channel, Dry Apologist, and if anybody wants to check that out, I'm always interested in posting things on there. So that's pretty much it.
Well, thank you very much. Now, we actually met on Twitter not long ago. I just started being active on Twitter, and you and I apparently share a lot of common people. The people that I follow people that you follow. And I raised a question a while ago because I didn't really have an understanding of what objective morality is, and you volunteered to come on and talk about it. So, Dry Apologist, what the puck is objective morality?
Yeah. So, and what I say about this may not represent what everybody says, but generally objective is considered something that's mind independent would be objective, and subjective is mind dependent. But I think it might be better, and I don't know if this will be helpful or not, but better to categorize it something as objective if it's based in reason, and something subjective if it's based in sensations. So I don't know if that's helpful, but then I kind of have an argument for objective morality kind of based on that distinction. If you want me to present that, or if you want to break that down a little.
Go ahead.
Okay. And again, I don't know how strong of an argument this is, so I've run it by a few people, but it'll be interesting to sort out. So basically, if my sensations, and by sensations I just mean like experiences of pleasure, if those about like eating food were to totally change, so like I like pizza, but if tomorrow pizza was disgusting and eating dirt was all of a sudden tasted good, I mean, I would want to eat dirt and not eat pizza. So to me, that indicates is subjective based on how I've defined subjective as sensation-based. So it's rooted in my sensations. But if my moral decisions, if like the sensations I experienced from making moral decisions, if those were to totally change, I would hope that my moral decisions would stay the same. So to me, that indicates that, at least it gives inductive evidence that morality is not sensation-based, but rather it's reason-based, or at least partially reason-based. And to me, based on how I've defined objective, morality is objective, and rather than just purely subjective.
Okay, so help me out with this, because I spent a lot of time thinking about what objective means, right? And I've put out feelers, much like you have, and I put a posit out there to a number of groups that I was in, that I challenged them that objective seems to imply measurable. And I challenged them, can you come up with any objective trait that is not a measurement or quantification of some kind? So can we actually think of any objective traits that are not a quantification or a measurement? Like we can say it's 55 degrees outside. The desk that I'm sitting in front of is 1.5 meters long, right? Those are objective. We can all come to those agreements. But now, does that mean it is warm outside? Does that mean that this desk is too short? So even with an objective measurement, we can still make subjective decisions about it. So does objective then imply measurable? And if not, what things can we look at other than morality that are objective, but not a measurement or a quantification?
Sure. Yeah, it depends upon what you mean by measurable. So if by that you mean, is it empirical? I would say like math and logic are not purely empirical. Like we can apply them to the empirical physical world around us, but I would say like laws of logic or principles of mathematics, that those would not be empirical. So I would equate morals or moral reasoning along the lines of like logic and mathematical reasoning. So I would say that they're kind of similar in that regard.
And for what reason would it be put into one of those categories instead of something that is purely subjective, like what I like to eat for my pizza or how I like to tend my yard?
Yeah. Well, the way that I've categorized it is because, this argument about sensations. So it makes sense to me that something that's totally derived from my sensory experiences, that would be subjective. It's totally, contingent on the way that my body and my senses react. But something that is more absolute and unchanging, like I would say logic and math are, it's independent of how I feel about it. And I would say it's plausible, at least, to put morality in that category as well. Now, people can disagree over like what is a morally just claim or not, but the category itself, I think, belongs more in the category of reason, like logic and math, than the category of sensations, like what do I enjoy eating, what do I enjoy listening to, and so on.
Okay, now as you reason towards something that is that has an objective quality when it comes to morality, how does one go about that in a way that, like I can measure a table, you and I look at the same ruler and say, okay, 1.5 meters, right? So what can we both look at and agree on, and we can't argue that this is the actual, for lack of a better term, measurement for morality?
Sure. Yeah, I think you have to start with a foundation, or an epistemic foundation, and we may just end up disagreeing over what that foundation is. But anytime we're dealing with like foundations of what we know, I would say there are just certain starting points. We could call them first principles or just foundational truths, like the law of non-contradiction or 1 + 1 = 2. I don't know a way to convince you of those things other than to just give you examples and say it just seems obvious. So like to me, the claim like torturing somebody for fun is immoral, that just seems obvious to me. And I would just place it in the same category as like the claim that 1 + 1 = 2, or that something can't exist and not exist at the same time. I just look at them as just foundational truths of reason.
See, I actually kind of want to push back on this a little bit, because when you say something like, and this is one common example, torturing someone for fun. There are other very common examples that are used. And the two issues that I have with this is first of all, like, we could think of something like stealing is wrong, right? But in order to even know what stealing is, in order to have a concept of stealing, we have to have a concept of ownership, right? If you had a society where there was no ownership and everything just belonged to everybody, then there would be no such thing as stealing, and stealing would not be morally objectionable. You wouldn't even know what stealing was, because of the concept of the concept of ownership is not there. When it comes to killing is wrong, okay? You have to have a concept of what life is. You have to concept of why life is valuable, that it can be taken away or ended, right? So there's a lot of knowledge that has to go into it. And for that reason, I find it difficult to just say that one just knows. And my example with this is, are you familiar with Britney Spears? You know who that is? Okay, I have a unique Britney Spears story, but I'm guessing a lot of people don't. There was a time in your life before you were aware of who Britney Spears was. Right now, you are aware of Britney Spears. Are you aware of your exact Britney Spears moment? Like that moment where you became first aware of who Britney Spears was?
I think I actually do. I do remember finding out who Britney Spears was, but I imagine not everybody does.
Yeah, a lot of people, it's like they may have heard her on radio. It's like, oh, who's this singer? I have a rather unique story. We won't get into that. It's really silly. But the same way, like, do you know how you first knew that torture is wrong? My guess is that it's almost impossible for any of us to go back and figure out exactly that moment. But I'm also willing to bet that it was taught or learned either explicitly or implicitly. Does that make sense? And so this seems to be more something that we pick up as we are growing up in the culture that we're in, rather than something that's inherent. And if that's the case, how could we test for that? How could we find out if something like torture or stealing, killing, we'll call that the easy stuff. We can get to the harder stuff later. But the stuff that you and I would think of as everyone agrees this is wrong, how do we know that that's not just because we all grew up in a similar society?
Yeah. Well, I don't remember like when I realized like 1 + 1 = 2, but it just seems like that's the case. And obviously it's been reinforced in my mind, but it does seem correct. So to me, I'm going to give, and again, I'm not necessarily claiming that this argument I presented like proves objective morality, but I'm going to kind of give it the benefit of the doubt. I feel like it has some inductive weight. Like if I'm going to have the meter, is it going to go more towards, does this seem subjective or objective? To me, it points, the way I reason about morality points more towards objective than subjective. So I can't definitively prove that it's objective, but it does seem to make more sense of how I think about morality.
Okay, now I'm having trouble following that. Can you like go deeper into why it seems to make more sense as opposed to something that is, and again, like we can look at something that has both objective and subjective qualities, right? It's 55 degrees. I might think that's warm. You might think that's cold, depending on where you live, right? So what makes you want to lean toward objective, and where does that get us?
Sure. Well, this argument that I presented is a way. So, and I can break it down into like a syllogism. So like so that could go like this. If my opinion about X, that could be anything, changes due to my sensations, then my opinion about X is subjective. If my opinion about X does not change due to my sensations, then my opinion about X is objective. At least that's how I'm categorizing it. And then my opinions about morality would not change based on my sensations. Therefore, my moral opinion or my opinions about morality are objective. Now, you could push back on one of the premises, but I find all of those premises to be pretty plausible.
I guess like we've all, you know, I mean, I can't guess as to how old you are, but I'm guessing that we've all changed our minds about things. Like maybe they're not going to be deep enough things that we're going to call them moral decisions. Okay, but we've changed and we've grown. So it seems that we do change and our tastes do change, and we find out that some of the things that we thought were okay before really aren't, and vice versa. So how does that work within your argument?
Sure. Yeah, moral opinions can change. So it's just like I can learn new facts about math or logic, and my thoughts on those things can change. But I would say they don't change based on sensations of pleasure or pain. It's based on, I realized, oh, that's not the way to treat somebody with respect. So since I want to be a moral person, I'm going to change the way like I respond to somebody. And you come to a deeper realization in that way. So to me, it's more of a realization rather than, I don't like the way this feels, I'm going to stop doing it. I don't like the way that song sounds anymore, I'm going to stop listening to it. To me, those are more like subjective-based changes, while my moral changes are based more in my cognition, more in my reasoning over time.
Now, when you say treat other people with respect, this seems to be completely subjective based on what they view as respect. Like I grew up in a very different culture where we have specific names for every sibling, from like oldest son, second oldest son, third oldest son. I mean, there's a hierarchy there, right? And part of that respect is to address even siblings by these titles. Now, I don't know where you guys grew up, but I'm guessing that that's not part of the culture you were in. But it would be, you know, titles are a huge show of respect where I grew up. So that's completely subjective, though. And if you were to want to treat me with more respect, isn't that then dependent on my subjective interpretation of what is respectful? And if that's the case, then isn't this still going back to morality being subjective?
Yeah, how you want to be treated can be subjective, but I would say that there is, to me, it is based in reasoning, though. Like if I were to like, yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, because it can be cultural to some degree too. Like some cultures can say like, well, this is rude in this culture, and another culture can say this is, you know, this is the way we treat people. But to me, it still hovers around a core concept of respect. Like I would say, okay, maybe in this culture, shaking hands is polite, in this culture, it's not. But we're still trying to figure out what is respectful, even though there is some variation on how that manifests.
Okay, so even if we could quantify respect, like even if I told you all the titles that I wish to be referred to and you were compliant with that, then isn't it still kind of your decision whether or not you want to go along with that or not?
Yeah, it's your decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even if like, you know, like I could look at a table and I say, okay, all tables objectively are 1.5 meters. Well, that's a little long for me. I want a shorter table. So even though this is not strictly a table, but it works for our current needs. You see where I'm going with this? Like, let's say that there was something that was an objectively moral fact, right? And you and I are sitting at a table and we look at the moral fact and we look at each other and we say, you know what, I think we can do better than this. At the very least, I think we can come up with a solution that's going to work for us a little bit better. So even if there is a objectively correct moral anything, then how does that affect us?
Yeah, I mean, whether it affects you or not depends upon whether you want to be a moral agent or a moral being or not. But something could be like I could say, I don't care about math, I'm not going to use it, I'm not going to ever employ numbers, but it's still objectively true.
Okay. And I guess that's where I'm not saying this is part of moral facts, okay? But let's say that here's the three of us here, okay? And we find out that the moral fact is the correct thing to do for someone who does some sort of transgression is they should be killed. And we look at Ethan over here, and we're like, you know what? You did something wrong.
Wait, wrong way.
Yeah, you did something wrong, but I think we can do better. I don't think we need to kill you. So how does that fit in with the idea of objective morality? Even if it is like an objective fact, we're supposed to kill Ethan. What if we decide
why are we talking about killing
we can
Ethan?
do something better? Because I didn't want to talk about killing the guest.
Okay, all right, good point.
So
Yeah.
where does that fit?
Yeah, well, it sounds like what you're asking about is how to figure out how we apply our morals. And just like with math or logic, we can study the mathematical, logical principles and say, oh, this is a new mathematical truth. We didn't realize that, but it's kind of weaving our way through a system. So we may not know all moral truths or how to apply them, but they could still be out there objectively. So we could examine, like, what is the most respectful and just thing to do in this situation? And there could be disagreements over that. Somebody might say, well, punishing them in this way, that's the moral thing. Somebody else could say a different thing, but they're both trying to narrow in on that objective answer is how I would respond.
Okay, so okay.
I feel like I'm just the face here, Puck. You don't.
Well, ask anything you want.
No,
if this
Puck,
all this is going
asking,
over your head, I mean, this
you're asking all the good questions. You've got this. Continue.
Okay. Well, what is your take on this? Let's get you involved. Okay, you've heard your case for moral objective facts, and then you haven't heard any other case. But where are you with this so far?
That's where I should have just kept my mouth shut, and I was just throwing in the answer. You are significantly more qualified in this area, my friend.
Oh, I'm not. Okay, let me tell you this, Caleb. Okay, I mean, when it comes to thinking about morality, I'm kind of a newbie. Okay, just like a lot of other people, I have this rough sense of what's right and wrong. What I don't necessarily know is where that's from. And I guess where I'm coming from is a lot of the stuff that I can think of as right and wrong, I can look around society and I can see examples of other people saying this is right and wrong. You know, it's like I'm not the only person who thinks that torturing people for fun is wrong. There's evidence of it. It's in the media. It's everywhere. We see someone being tortured, and they always play that really sad music. You know, like the one with the puppies that need to be adopted on the infomercials, right? It's a sad thing. It's a bad thing, right? So you don't have to go very far to find examples. And the way I'd push back on when you said, well, you know, people just intuitively know 1 + 1 is 2. The thing is, you can go back to that, right? You can teach someone that 1 + 1 = 2, even if we don't remember how we learned it. And from there, you know, like we can get a whole basis of mathematics. Okay, so I go by this whole thing that any moral decision is learned, either implicitly or explicitly. Like my favorite one is adultery, right? Because, you know, when I was 5, 6, I don't know how many ever years old, and I was introduced to the 10 Commandments. I was reading the 10 Commandments. It's like, okay, what's this one right here? Hey, Mom, what's this one? What's adultery? And wow, because that's an awkward conversation to have with a 6-year-old, right? And I was like, well, really? There's a problem with that? Like, I didn't even know what marriage was, and then I'm being told that doing something outside of marriage is wrong, right? So all this is taught, though. All this is learned. It's not intuitive. So how can we test to see if these moral ideas are intuited instead of learned?
Well, the fact that they're learned to me isn't really a problem. Like I learned logic and math too. And you say we can go back to it. I don't know if you mean back like in history. Like I would say anything we know, we were taught it at some point, or we discovered it, but we discovered it from other information that we acquired. So I don't know that would make something not objective.
Okay, so what's the difference between something that is a true moral fact, an objective moral fact, and just something that we've grown up in the same society, always believing, never being specifically taught, but it just feels wrong because of how we've grown up and the culture surrounding us? How do we tell the difference between those?
Yeah, I think you do need a sort of moral starting point. So if say like you're really inclined through an intuition that something like slavery or torture or whatever example you're going to use, and you really think that's wrong, and you're not going to be a nihilist and say like, oh, whatever, But then whether that is truly wrong in the subjective sense or in a subjective sense, that's going to probably be a conversation you're going to have later down the road, like we're having right now. But how do we know? I mean, the origin of how we acquire a belief and the ontology or nature of that belief are two separate questions. So yeah, anything we know, we were probably taught, at least to our basic beliefs, we were probably taught by somebody and we trusted them, and it was taught because our culture encourages it and so on. But I mean, I think I get what you're saying. Like, how do we know it's not just purely from our culture? But then I think that's where we apply our criteria. And it's not necessarily a deductive, foolproof criteria, but like I've made this criteria that I find it plausible based in, is it based in sensations or is it not? Is it based more just in my conceptual kind of evaluation, reason? So and to me, it seems like it's the latter.
Okay, so when you're evaluating a moral quandary, like you say, you can rationalize to it. Are you looking at like its effects, or are you looking at like how are you coming up with the rationale as to whether or not something is a moral positive or moral negative?
Right. Yeah. At that point, it does become intuitional, just like with logic or math. Like, how did I come to the conclusion 1 + 1 = 2? Well, I was taught it, and it just seems obviously the case. Now, I can understand the difference could be that we can work with that in the world. We can count an object, see, 1, 1, 2, but you're still applying this sort of foundational concept that is sort of built into your mind. And it just seems like that's correct. And to me, like in a moral situation, I'm doing the same thing. I'm in a situation, I say, well, this seems morally wrong. It doesn't seem to respect people. And I just take that as axiomatic. Now, if you have trouble taking something as axiomatic, then it may be difficult then to accept that something is morally objective. But I do think that everybody takes certain things as axiomatic and that we should. So why can't morality be one of those things?
Ethan, the word you're looking for right now is presupposition.
Kind of.
And like I agree. I hold those. Okay. Yeah. Like I said, Ethan's new to this, right? So he might not have heard axioms before. He's definitely heard presuppositions, and I agree. I have those, right?
For those go ahead. For those just tuning in, Huck is the resident smart atheist. I'm just the entertaining guy who tries to have fun while I do this.
Oh, please! I'm just the eye candy.
But Huck is the one with a little credibility here, and I generally learn a lot from him.
Thank you. Okay, if you want to talk axiomatic, I have those, right? I have those, like, I guess presuppositions is the best way to put it, where I can't prove it to anybody, but I got to start somewhere, right? Like, I believe that there is a mind-independent reality out there. I believe that we all share it. I believe that there are other minds operating within this reality. I can't prove it. I think I'm talking to two different people right now, but, there's a chance I'm not. But I have to start somewhere. And I treat you guys as individuals who are worthy of respect, even though I can't really prove it, right? I presuppose some sort of uniformity because I have a pen right here that I'm writing with the same kind of letters and the same script. And what I write now, I feel like I can come in tomorrow and understand what I wrote. So I get that. I have a few of those. But I guess I would be of the opinion that I would want as few of those as possible. And if I was starting somewhere with the X is wrong, I'd start at some point like wondering what that means. So when like you're bringing us some good points right here. You're saying part of it is going to be the effect that it has, right? If other people are feeling disrespected, it's gonna have some effect. And I was thinking about this when I was bringing up pi, right? Like we're never going to know exactly what pi is ever. It's an irrational number. We can get close. We can get so close that any error is going to be insignificant, right? But we're never going to get exactly pi. Most of us are fine with 3.1415926, which if you use that, a circle the size of 275 Highway in Cincinnati the error is going to be about 6 inches. So it's good enough, right? So when it comes to morality, excuse me, even if it does have an objective state, it makes me wonder. Let's say that even though every single human on earth thinks that torturing people is wrong, I have here in the notes that objective means independent of minds. In other words, every single person there could be wrong about the idea that torturing for fun is wrong. What if we find out that something that everybody truly believes is objectively incorrect? Now what?
Yeah, it's possible. So it does come down. So you said you want as few of axioms or your few of foundations or axioms or presuppositions, whatever you want to say, as possible.
Right.
I don't know that I share that same intuition. I don't know if I want as few as possible. I just only want to hold the ones that seem correct. And to me, moral foundation seems like one of those axioms. So maybe I just take it as a given, but yeah, to me, it seems like it belongs in that list. So we could just be coming from a different intuition on that. But I guess for me, until I'm talked out of that, and then, I still like this argument that I gave, and I'm going to take it as an axiom until I'm given a good reason, not to.
No, and that's like I don't think we're gonna really push hard enough on each other that we're gonna change each other's mind. I'm not even really trying to convince you of anything because I don't even really know what I said. And what I'm hearing from you is completely different from what I've heard about objective morality in other places. Are you familiar with the channel Inspiring Philosophy?
Yeah, I watched some of his videos.
There's this 10-part video series about the moral ontological argument, right? Most of that either goes over my head or just makes me raise an eyebrow, but I'm not hearing much here that you're talking about that is similar to that. So it seems like a lot of people, the objective morality doesn't seem to be objective as far as what the definition is. Someone has their Facebook notifications, something on. I need to be. Am I getting?
I think it's me. I just muted my phone. I apologize. I did not know anybody could hear that.
Yeah, we should all be so popular. Actually, Bestname Ever said something really interesting. If we go up there, I would say that traveling, expanding your horizons, talking to people from other cultures, spoilers can help with that. I think this is in reference to expanding your moral base, right? Like something that you and I would think of as wrong or right. We look at other people who live under a completely different context, and maybe that changes our mind about something. I brought up that hypothetical about a society with no concept of ownership, therefore there's no stealing. Right? So what is then the influence of other cultures who didn't grow up with the same biases and presuppositions that we did? What, if anything, should we learn from them? How does that help us get closer to objective moral facts?
Yeah, I mean, another culture may or may not help you. I mean, I imagine that, we all have things to learn from one another, but it may or may not. There could be a culture that's so morally confused that we really don't have things to learn from that culture. And obviously we should try to find a way to step outside of that to say, is our culture like that, and so on. And that, again, it goes back to, your presuppositions, really, your foundations. And to me, like you said a second ago, well, there's different definitions for what objective could mean. I agree. So working within because we could be having a different debate. Like if inspiring philosophy is on here, it could mean one thing, and if I'm on here, it could mean another thing. But what we're trying to figure out is, what I'm saying that it is. Now, I agree that objective is mind independent, but I think also calling objective, reason-based, to me, that's just a sharper way of saying mind independent. So I don't think reasoning is dependent on minds. I think our minds have access to reasoning.
Okay, so going back to sorry. By the way, this is really awesome that you're from Sweden, and I'm just doing some calculations on the time difference, right? And am I right in thinking that it's about 3? That's what I do. It's like 3 in the morning, almost 4 o'clock in the morning there. So thank you very much for joining us from all the way in Sweden.
I have to just address this real quick.
Go.
I am always looking to bring on atheists from other countries. So if you are interested, please send me a message on Facebook at Ethan Michael, or go to my Facebook at Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. I've been trying to meet as many atheists from around the country as possible. I would love to hear your story and hear more about Sweden.
Yeah, I don't count. Ohio feels like another country sometimes, but yeah, I guess it doesn't count. 4 a.m. Okay, sorry, 4 a.m. Okay, thank you so much for joining us from all the way in Sweden. Okay, so let's go back to pi, because again, pi is one of those things we're never going to get it. We're going to get close enough, right? Now, there's going to be some natural consequences if we say, okay, you know what? We're going to stop at 3.14. That's it. That's how we're going to define pi. But eventually, we're going to get to some problematic places, right? Like if we really need accurate measurements, suddenly 3.14 isn't going to cut it. And by defying using the actual number of pi, or finding out more about pi, we're going to have some natural consequences from this. Measurements are going to be off. Predictions are going to be off. a lot of things are going to be off. In the same way, if there is going to be some objective morality that we're a little bit off on, what kind of consequences can we expect to see?
Yeah, so then that kind of gets into normative ethics in a way, because there can be bad consequences that follow from poor moral decision making, but not everybody's going to agree that that's what makes a moral choice bad. And like, I would be one of those. Like, I think the consequences can be part of what makes it wrong, but it's not totally what makes it wrong. So I don't know that there necessarily has to be consequences to determine objective morality. It's kind of like the situation of like applying, the law of non-contradiction in a situation like, what's the consequence if I don't say that, if I don't acknowledge that the computer can't exist and fail to exist at the same time? I don't know if there's a consequence other than that it just seems wrong. Now, I do think maybe somebody not affirming objective morality, that could lead to a kind of moral relativism or moral nihilism that could be destructive to society. But it does seem like, to me at least, that that's kind of independent of the question. So to me, it's just more of a, an ontological question. What is the nature of it? But I would say, it would be a consequence in that if you fail to be a moral person and there is objective morality, to me, that would be an objectively bad thing. But that wouldn't be the way I would measure it, though, whether it exists or not.
Okay, so and I keep coming up to with all these different examples, so thank you very much for bearing with me. Like, I try to minimize it right now. This is my non-philosopher brain at work, right? And I try to minimize it so that we have a world where it's just you and me, or just a world where it's just you, me, and Ethan, right? Now, obviously, it's not going to last very long because we have a maximum size of one generation, but like, how would we make moral decisions between the three of us? And even if there was an objectively correct answer, like, I can come up with a good rationale for why we should make the best decisions for us now, rather than follow, if we are somehow made aware of it, what the objectively moral correct decision is. So where does your philosophy fit with like dealing in a much smaller scale as opposed to a much larger scale, like society, or everybody in your social surroundings? How would we apply that to just the three of us? You see what I'm saying?
So you're asking, like, how would we apply like moral reasoning if it were just like the three of us, like on an island or something?
No, like even if there was, an island's a good example. Even if there was an objectively moral correct way, now the three of us are in a circumstance where, you know what, we have to come up with a way to survive and coexist, just three of us. Now what? Even if there is a truly objectively correct state, like how do philosophers put it? An ideal world, best of all possible worlds, right? Some other phrase like that. It doesn't matter. We don't have the ideal world. We have the world with just the three of us, and we have to find a way to coexist. And maybe the best way for us to coexist and survive is not by following by the book objective morality. So now what? So I guess, like, my question is, even if there was an objective morality, why should we go with that instead of what is suiting our purposes now?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, from a theistic standpoint, of course, looking at the afterlife would be, a reason. But, like Plato said, like, virtues, I think Plato said this, virtue is its own reward. So, if you want to be a virtuous person, it's good in and of itself. But in terms of, just getting along in society, yeah, it may not help you. Like, we can think of people through history where being moral did not benefit them. But I do think on average, though, like, if I'm going to treat you with kindness and respect and honesty, on average, I think that is going to help, us get along. So I do think it helps, but I do think the consequences are kind of independent. So if you're asking, do we need it? I think it depends. It depends upon how much agreement we're going to have, but I do think it can be beneficial.
Okay, so now, it seems like you can have a whole conversation about morality without bringing up God or the afterlife or religion at all, right? It seems like if we want to stay in the realm of normative ethics, or I know I'm not using the term correctly, so forgive me, but it seems like we can have a long conversation about this and not bring up religion at all, right? So where does religion fit into the concept of an objective morality?
Yeah, a lot. In case you guys don't know or other people don't know, yeah. So I do defend Christianity, but that's not our particular topic. But yeah,
I
think
kind of gave you away there. So.
Right. Yeah, I think somebody can be a moral realist and not, be a Christian or believe in God. There are atheists who are moral realists, and not all Christians will agree with that position. But I do think somebody can be a moral realist and be an atheist.
For those of you who doesn't know what it means, what is a moral realist?
Sure, somebody who believes in objective morality. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's mind independent. Yeah.
Okay, and just to throw the contrast in there, what's your understanding of the opposing view? Like, there's moral realist, and that's obviously distinct from something else. So what would be the opposite of moral realist?
Yeah. Right. So moral subjectivist, but it gets tricky because there's different kinds of moral realists and different kinds of moral subjectivists, and I'm sure you're aware of that. But like, I'm trying to think for a second how to want to categorize these. But like, relativism's a type of moral subjectivist, or like emotivism is a type of moral subjectivist.
What is a emotivist? That's my first time hearing that one.
Okay, so yeah, and I'm not an expert on, but basically that morality reduces to just kind of preferences, like kind of like when I was talking about like sensation based, like, well, I don't like that. I don't like hurting people. That makes me feel bad, but it's not morally right or wrong. It's just that gives me a bad feeling that I don't like. And I could be straw manning. If somebody's here, comes on and they're a motivist, they may explain it, but that's kind of what it is. It's not, there's no fact of the matter. It's purely based in your emotions or non-cognitive evaluation of the situation. So it'd be a type of moral subjectivism. But the reason why I bring it up is because a lot of times, so moral non-realism or subjectivism, a lot of times people think that is relativism, but it's not necessarily. So when we use the word relativism, we're saying that your moral beliefs are entirely dependent on the culture that you live in. So you wouldn't say another culture is wrong. You would just say, this is the morality you exercise in your culture. Now, I find moral relativism to be highly implausible, but somebody could be an emotivist, something like that, and just say, there is no fact of the matter. You just have strong feelings or emotions about what you prefer to do. And to me, that does seem coherent. I don't think it's correct, but I can see where somebody's coming from with that. So those would be types of moral subjectivism.
Let's address Kristen's question here really quick.
Okay.
And it's directly for you. So,
does Dry think that killing someone is always wrong? Is that objectively morally wrong, regardless of the situation?
Yeah, so it's not always wrong because there would be situations like self-defense, for example. I would say that killing an innocent person intentionally is always morally wrong. But the way I think about what makes something morally wrong or not is going to go back to that sort of axiom I was talking about earlier about, how does this respect a person? So somebody who is trying to harm me or harm society, it may be, that person has forfeited some of their rights, and we do have a right to defend ourselves, as much as necessary, but not excessively. But, an innocent person hasn't transgressed. So to me, whether something is absolutely right or wrong, we have to look at a more fundamental question is, how does this violate that person's dignity? Have they transgressed or not? So hopefully that answers it.
Wouldn't that make morality entirely subjective then?
Well, it's context dependent. But to me, what's objective is the respect that you owe to somebody. But that context of how you owe that respect, that depends upon the situation. So like, we should never kill somebody who's an innocent person. But if that person tries to kill you, you do have a right to defend yourself. So in that sense, it's context dependent. So there is a relative aspect of morality, but there is also an objective, unchanging aspect, I would say. And that's why some actions are always wrong, like killing an innocent person, torturing somebody, slavery, and so on. But some actions, it does depend upon the context. Like lying, for example, I would say lying is wrong in most situations. But if you're engaged in self-defense, I would say lying can be morally justified. So it is context dependent.
Or like if there's somebody from Cincinnati who asked, "Hey, what's your credit card number? And can you turn it over and give me the 3 numbers on the back?" Go ahead and give us. This is like my favorite example. It's like no matter how much somebody values honesty, they also value privacy, right? And there's going to be some sort of clash at some point where one ideal seems to butt heads with the other, right? One of the easiest ones I can think of is like identity theft, right? You have a right to your privacy, but then if I ask you a question, you're not being honest about what your social security number is. So somewhere in there, like honesty and privacy are gonna clash. And this is where morality becomes really interesting to me. Not the easy stuff, okay? Like, is it wrong to torture someone just for fun? Or I'm talking about the more difficult stuff, okay? What is the best way for society to share scarce resources? If there's 12 people and there's only enough food for 11, what's the moral way to distribute this? Okay, like these are the harder questions. And for these, I don't think that you and I would come up with the same ones. There are no intuitions. There are no easy answers here. There's no, I just need to think about it and know, right? Like one of us could say, you know what? Whoever is the eldest has lived a good life. They can go without a portion. And the rest of society, which has more of a chance of carrying on society, we're the ones who should be healthy. Or you could say, no, you know what? The right thing is everybody eats a little bit less. And we just got to get through the lean times, or everybody takes turns being the one who doesn't eat, right? But so why is it always the forgive me for saying this, the easy questions that people bring up when they're talking about moral facts, and never the really gray areas?
Right. Well, the easy ones are easy to establish the case. So like there are mathematical questions. On most mathematical questions, I wouldn't be able to figure out, but I think there is a right answer. So there are some contexts, some moral contexts we may not be able to figure out because we don't know enough about what would actually respect people the most, is how I would put it. So like, I don't know, what would be the fairest thing to do in terms of divvying up the food and so on. So I can't fully determine the context, but I think there is a right answer. And if we knew more about the consequences and so on, we could determine it. We just don't have enough information, just like we don't have enough information to figure out all scientific mathematical questions. But those easy ones, those are more basic. To me, that's like, well, 1 + 1 = 2. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows torturing somebody's wrong. But when it gets down to these tough ones, that's more like, a math problem that I wouldn't be able to solve, and maybe nobody can. It's just it's a tough moral problem. But to me, that just shows the difficulty in figuring out the moral solution. I don't think it indicates that there isn't one.
Casey, you're going to have to explain that a little bit. I'm not sure what you mean. The gray areas are the agreement spots. It seems to me that those are the spots where there's more disagreement. So maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying.
By the way, he did say hi. So hi, Randy. Thanks again.
Hi, Randy. Thank you very much.
That's all.
And I just wanted to make sure the correct spelling of that is P asterisk CK. P asterisk CK. So it's not just regular puck. Just no, this has been really good, and I'm glad that we're able to have this nice long civil conversation. I'm not sure that you're moving my needle much because there's still so many questions out there, and what you're presenting is a logical possibility. But even you said, it's like it's reasonable, but I don't think I can, or I don't remember the exact words you. So forgive me if I'm misrepresenting. But you said it's a logical understanding, but it's probably not a definitive proof.
Right, it's not deductive, right? I look at it as an inductive or abductive way of assessing it. Like, to me, it makes sense. It provides some evidence to me for moral realism, but yeah, whether it's deductive or not, it's going to depend. I don't know that's a deductive proof. Yeah.
Okay, so the last, and I guess maybe not last, but the place I wanted to take this is, you said that your definition of objective morality said that it is independent of what minds, it's independent of opinion, what we think about it, right? So right now we can all probably agree that torturing people for fun is wrong, okay? But if we're to go by the idea that it's independent of minds, even if every single person in the world thought that torturing for fun is wrong, maybe it's morally right. And so if you were to think of something that you think is core, and then you later came to the understanding of what the moral fact about it truly was. Like, let's say, objectively, morally, there's really nothing wrong with torturing. Okay? Should we do that? Should we do what we find to be morally, objectively best, or should we make our own minds about it and say, you know what, even though it is morally okay to torture, let's go ahead and not?
Sure. I mean, it's tough to answer because I would agree that if it is the moral thing to do, you should do it. But I think it's obviously not. So it's like, it's kind of hard to play that game. But yeah, if something is a moral thing to do, you should do it. It's just, to me, torturing somebody for fun is just obviously not. So it's kind of like asking me, like, well, what if 1 + 1 did equal 3? Shouldn't you do math that way? And I would say, well, yeah, sure, but that's just not how it works.
So let's really put the rubber on the road here. If you personally became convinced that there was an action that was morally correct, this is the morally right decision to make, but it's something that the society that you live in would consider to be an atrocity, which one would win?
Yeah, I would have to go with my moral conviction because, I mean, society can be wrong. I would say our society is wrong about some moral claims, but yeah,
so even if it's like completely objectionable to all of society, even if all of society condemns it, if you were convinced of the moral truth of something, you would act on that rather than the what the society says is the overall good.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I would. Now, I could be weak, right? But I hope that I would act on my own moral convictions. Yeah, because I mean, you know, we can think of societies that have endorsed things that we would say are wrong, and people did struggle to combat it or go along with it, right?
So let's end this on a really fun just thought experiment, because that was a really heavy question. I don't want to end there. Let's just have some fun, okay? We can think about some things that in American culture 200 years ago, they thought it was okay. We look at that and say, what were you thinking? Or like one example is marrying age only became like where it is now actually really recently. And so back then, the idea of like a 13-year-old getting married, you know what, that's just what you did, right? We have developed from there. We're different now, and we think that making a 13-year-old marry is an abomination. So just as a fun thought experiment, Ethan, you're in on this too. What do you think we would look at today, 200 years from now? And people 200 years ago would look at that and say, I can't believe they thought this was a good idea. What would you guess is in that category?
I'd say, all right, this is a tough one, but I would say typically how we still treat minorities and underprivileged communities. I'd like to think 200 years from now, we're going to look back and go, why were we treating people this way? Or why were we allowing, or at least this is what I hope happens. I hope 200 years from now, people will not have the Bible, and they'll be like, why were we following this and treating people based off of this? So I would think, I don't know.
Dry, what you got?
Yeah, well, I know you said this was going to be a light question, but people aren't going to agree with me on this. But I think it's going to be abortion and abortifacient drugs and procedures. I think, yeah.
In which direction do you think people?
I think we're going to look at that as wrong.
Okay.
Wait, sorry. We're going to look at I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. We're going to look at abortion as wrong?
Yeah.
200 years from now.
Yeah. I mean, people already do, but I think, well, it's going to get us into another topic, but I think society's moving. Society's moving in that direction. But
okay. No, and
I think it's moving in the opposite direction. Okay. People are becoming more accepting of, and willing. I really want to tread so carefully here.
Yeah, I should. I thought it was a light question. No, you were right to answer it the way you wanted to. Absolutely right to answer it the way you wanted to. But
I am not going to touch this with a 10-foot pole. So
this is a conversation for another time. We'll touch it with a different 10-foot pole on a different show.
Three men should not be talking about abortion. Just say it.
In a chat full of women chiming in right now. You're right. I'm not gonna. My answer to this would have been a different understanding of privacy. Okay.
Sorry, I do have to, for clarity real quick, I apologize to interrupt. So people are aware I am pro-choice. I just want to make sure that's apparent. Continue.
Yeah, we're not here to talk about my views. So I like being really neutral about that.
Answer. Yeah. For clarity, I want people to know where I stand since it got brought up.
No, and this is how I want the puck to be. You know, Caleb, I apologize because you're kind of on the you're one of our guinea pigs. Okay, you're show number 3. Okay, so we're still test driving a lot of how this show is going to work,
You're
and I try to stay as neutral as possible. Yes, I have my opinions, and yes, I have my ideas, but this isn't really the place for that. That I want you to be able to speak up about as much as you can. I just really push back on the parts that I was really confused about, things that didn't make sense. So thank you very much for helping us really flesh this out. But my answer to the 200-year question is the things that we consider privacy. Is going to be very different. Like we all remember that story about that dad who was really upset at Target for sending his teenage daughters ads for diapers and cribs and baby stuff. Did you guys hear about that?
No.
Okay, so what happened was Target kind of has an algorithm that decides what advertising to send you based on your shopping trends, right? And dad got really upset that Target was sending his teenage daughter all this stuff for babies. It's like, what are you doing sending this to my daughter? Well, it turned out that Target looked at her buying habits based on the Target Red Card and said, hey, you know, when you tend to buy certain things, it tends to indicate that you're pregnant. And her shopping habits indicated that if she was pregnant, Target caught on to that and sent that advertising to her. Well, come to find out, dad didn't know this, that his teenage daughter actually was pregnant. So, and that was, you know, based on an algorithm that Target was able to figure out. And then the interesting question here is that a privacy concern? Because if we had a mom and pop store at the corner who, you know, they knew us by name, I knew them by name, and they know when I go in there, I always get the half pound of roast beef and a block of cheddar cheese, right? It's just good business if they remember me from next time. So why is it any different if a large corporation does that? It's like they know when I go shopping, this is what I like to buy. Let's send them some targeted advertising. That makes sense to me. It's a lot better than sending me advertisement for things I don't care about, right? So I think the privacy ideas, especially with technology, is going to be very different. Like medical technology. I am a fan of microchips. I know nobody else is, but I'm a fan of medical microchipping. So, I got an eyebrow there. We'll have to talk about this more.
Yeah, Puck. We're going to have to talk about this.
We are. Okay. So are there any questions from the audience, last minute questions for anybody here on the panel regarding our views on morality?
Actually, I have.
That's really ambiguous, Kim. There's 3 hymns here. So
that's a good point. Yeah. Which hymn do you like? So here, I have a question, and I'm going to put you both on the spot right now. Okay. New name idea. Instead of your friendly neighborhood atheist, the ADHD atheist, because I'm always all over the place. Which name do you prefer?
I like your friendly neighborhood atheist.
I do too, but I
mean, and it depends on like what do you want to really be the identifier of your show? Like, do you want the first thing that people know about your show is this show is going to be spastic and all over the place, or the show is really friendly?
Oh, here we go, Larry the Christian. There we go.
Oh, okay, Larry. I apologize. You caught into the conversation. The last question that I had asked was, and I don't know it necessarily does tie into moral ontology. The last question I asked was, we can look at 200 years ago and see what we considered okay back then, but now we consider to be wrong or immoral. So I was performing a thought experiment. What 200 years from now would people look back on today and think is like, how could they possibly have believed that? How could they possibly have gone along with that? So no, probably nothing directly. I was just doing a moral thought experiment. I'm not sure that targeted marketing does have anything to do with moral ontology. Max, do not.
By the way, Mr. Dry Apologist, I didn't get your answer on that question.
Yeah, you did. You're just blocking it. You got his answer.
Sorry, on the name of your show?
No, just my name. The ADHD atheist or your friendly neighborhood
that question. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I think the friendly neighborhood, I think, like, I don't know what the second one really means, so I would go with the first one.
Well, do you know what ADHD is?
Like ADD? Like,
yeah, it's the same thing. I have, like, rampant ADHD.
Right, I know what that is. Yeah, that didn't click though when you said it, so I would go with the first one because the second one kind of threw me off. Yeah.
All right, I like the first one better anyway.
You can. This was a genuine pleasure having you here, by the way. This is great. This is a wonderful conversation. We have like so many other places that we can go. So, would you ever mind being back on with either of us or just Ethan and talk more about the kind of things we're bringing up?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
All right,
Caleb, can you plug where people can see you?
Please.
Yeah, I have a channel, Dry Apologist. So just like my name. on here.
And if you
How,
look really
how did you
closely,
get the name,
oh, sorry.
the Dry Apologist?
Oh, I was just trying to come up with something, and I'm just kind of dry in my personality, so I was just trying to kind of beat people to the punch on that. So.
All right. That was. I thought that's what it was, but I didn't want to make the assumption.
You know, like maybe you live in a dry county or something. You know, it's like there'll be no alcohol on this channel. But then again, isn't the intro to your channel like there seems to be alcohol on the intro to your channel? See, this I'm trying to show you. I actually do pay attention to you.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, I've seen you in the chat. Yeah, my channel's Western themed, so it was Apologetic Showdown. Now it's just the name of the show on the channel, but yeah.
Well, if you like, Kristen, if you liked this, Puck is doing this every Wednesday. So here's what you can count on from my channel. You can count on the more goofy, entertaining, and fun stuff to be on mine. And with Puck, that's where you're going to learn something. I mean, hopefully people learn something from me. Although Puck is strictly business. I love that. I think he's a great balance to the channel. He brings on, as you can see, some very intelligent guests. So Puck, thank you, my friend.
Very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you guys all very much for taking your time. Thank you to everybody in chat. We got Kristen in there, Kim, Larry, microchipping. Oh man, this is the entirely wrong time to start that conversation. Remind me and I'll get back to you about that. Okay. But yeah, medical microchipping, I think is a good thing to do. Any other last minute, anything from chat? Any other questions? I think thank you guys so much. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And this is a huge weight off my back because Caleb, Dry Apologist, you're the biggest name we've ever had on this channel. So thank you. You've been on Modern Day Debates and now you're making an appearance.
Hey,
so
don't forget Jenna Belk and don't forget Jenna Aldrich.
Yeah, but this is like a cool apologist. It's like we're stretching a Rolodex in both directions, right? This is awesome. Point. So if you had somebody that you would recommend for our show, like who should we talk to and what should we talk to them about? Like somebody who would be willing to come on What the Puck and answer a What the Puck question.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll send you some names of some people. I don't want to throw them out there if they don't want to do it, but I'll send you some names. I just don't want to make it awkward for them, but yeah, I'll send you some names of some people that might be interested. Sure.
Awesome.
All right, you guys are wonderful. Thank you so much. And next week we will be back with another episode of What the Puck.